All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about housing options in San Diego. I know this is a topic of interest for lots of students. As soon as they know that they're coming to UC San Diego, know how to apply for their visa. The next topic is where can I secure housing? So thank you to our campus partners for being here. I also want to give a special shout out to our colleagues in the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. So we're so grateful to have that partnership. We work really closely with our partners in this division. You also might hear it referred to as GEPA, because we know that UC San Diego is a very large campus. There's lots of things to navigate when you come to this campus. And so with that, we would try to work really closely with our campus partners to make sure, even if we don't know the specific answer, we are connecting you with folks who do. So with that, we're very grateful for having our GEPA colleagues and hosting this in collaboration. My name is Grace Fuller. I serve as the Interim Assistant Director of International Student Experience and Engagement for students, scholars, and families at the International Services and Engagement Office, also known as ISEO. And we have a few colleagues here. I'll pass it over to actually let's start with Mary because I don't see you mentioned on the screen. So apologies, but Mary, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mary Hogan, and I'm the Director of Graduate Admissions here at UC San Diego. And I'm so glad to be here to answer any questions that you may have that are admissions related.
And I'm Shauna Slabiota. I also work in the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. And part of my work is organizing welcome activities for incoming graduate students. So we will have a chance to interact as you start to begin your journey at UCSD.
Hi, my name is Myra. I'm the Housing Allocations Coordinator here in Grad Housing. We manage the waitlist, and we're happy to be here to assist you with your questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marissa Lola. I am a Housing Allocations Assistant with the Graduate and Family Housing Department.
And then, unfortunately, our colleagues from the Basic Needs Hub Off-Campus Housing Office were not able to attend today, but they did share lots of good information that I'll pass along to you that talks about off-campus housing and off-campus housing resources. All right, so a brief little snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. First, we have some admissions from for some reminders from graduate admissions for first steps you need to take. Then we'll focus on-campus housing options, as I know that is a huge interest for many of our students. Then we'll discuss some off-campus housing options, as well as additional and miscellaneous housing resources. We'll close with upcoming webinars and additional resource reminders. And then we always dedicate the end of each one of our webinars for an open question and answer to hopefully get as many questions as possible answered today. A little bit of housekeeping. If this is your first time joining us for a webinar, you are in listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but unfortunately we can't hear you. So the main way we'll interact today is through that Q&A feature on your Zoom menu bar. If for some reason we don't get to your question today, please know you can always contact us via icontact.ucsd.edu. And finally, we are recording. So you'll be able to view this webinar recording as well as all future webinar recordings at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. That link is also the place where you can register for upcoming webinars. So hopefully it's a one-stop shop for you to view previous webinar recordings as well as register for future webinars. And here's just a screenshot, maybe if you haven't used the Zoom webinar or the Zoom Q&A feature before. And so again, we do have a dedicated time at the end of today's session for open question and answer. So I would encourage you to try to see as much of the presentation as possible, see if that question will have already been answered. That being said, I do know, being in your shoes, sometimes I'm so anxious and I'm like, oh no, like I want to make sure I don't forget a question. So if you have a burning question, you are welcome to submit that question. We have different folks monitoring the Q&A, but we may not answer it until the end of the session. And with that, I will pass it over to our GEPA colleagues to talk a little bit about graduate admissions and reminders.
Thank you so much, Grace. All right, so as I shared earlier, I'm here just to chat a little bit about some reminders for you when it comes to admissions. And you might be thinking, like, oh, I already was admitted. What do I need to do? And so at this point, we're always going to be directing you back to your portal. So in your portal, there are all of the important to-do items that you need to be keeping in mind to make sure that you are all set to arrive on campus, and that you're able to enroll moving forward. And a few of the items that I want you to especially keep an eye out for are the statement of legal residence form. So you'll see in your portal under a to-do items form section that the statement of legal residence may be listed. I say may because it's not actually required for every single program here at UC San Diego. So if you go to your portal and it looks a little different or it doesn't list the statement of legal residence, do not panic. It just means that it's not required for you. I also want to note that if you are a student who is coming into a program at the Rady School of Management, your portal may be organized a little bit differently. But you generally will not have that statement of legal residence form listed. But again, if you ever have questions, you can always contact our team. Our email is on this slide, gradadmissions@ucsd.edu, and we're happy to help and answer any questions you may have. And then also very important, most students here at UC San Diego are admitted on a provisional status. And so when you are in your portal, which we're going to show you a snapshot of, you may have just seen it, and it should look familiar, there is going to be a to-do tab and of like your checklist items. And it's going to show how you can finalize your admission here at UCSD. So you may recall that when you applied, you were not required to submit like official academic transcripts, degree certificates, etc. And now, because you've been admitted, we're now needing those official items. So at this time, you're provisionally admitted, and in your portal, you're going to have a detailed list of what you need to submit and how to submit it to our office in order to finalize your admission. So we're ready for the next slide here. And then, so this is just a snapshot of your portal. Again, if you are a Rady student, your portal is going to look a little different, but no reason to panic. You should have the same information. So you'll see here in the snapshot on the left-hand side, that's the home tab. And then on the right-hand side, that's your checklist items. So the forms section that we talked about earlier that may have your statement of legal residence requirement is going to be under forms, which you can see on your left-hand side. And then your checklist items tab is on the right-hand side. And that is where you are going to see what you need to submit in order to finalize your admission and how to submit it. Again, if you ever have questions, you can reach out to us at that email address. It's listed in your portal. We've shared it with you here. So gradadmissions@ucsd.edu. We're happy to help. And I do want to emphasize that you do not need to have your admission finalized in order to start the visa process here at UCSD. So sometimes that's a question we get. So, there's no need to wait to start that process. We want you jumping into that process. You have until the 4th Friday of your first quarter here at UC San Diego to get all your materials submitted to our office. So it's quite a ways away from now. So you have some time, but we just want you to start thinking about this and gathering everything. And my final reminder is if you're thinking to yourself like, yes, I want to submit all these items, we so appreciate the motivation, but there's one asterisk there. If you are a student who is currently enrolled in your bachelor's program or a master's program or any other program in another institution, please wait to request and send your official academic documents from your current or previous institutions until they are complete. So if you send us a transcript that has like in progress coursework, it is not going to fulfill the requirement. We go into this in detail on the portal, but I always like to emphasize it here because it's a bummer if you go to all that work to submit things and then you have to resubmit them. So That's everything I have to say. If you have any questions, like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team via email.
All right, thank you so much, Mary. And then we also have some reminders from ISEO before we jump into today's content of housing. So just as a friendly reminder, we highly recommend going to inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu. This will break down the visa application process in terms of how to apply for your Form I-20 or DS 2019. We did have 2 previous webinars, First Steps in Applying for your J1 or F1 visa, that we hosted last week. Those recordings are either up on our website or will be up there shortly. But the website is such a helpful resource. You can almost use it as a checklist of what steps to complete in what order. So I truly highly recommend going to that website and then contacting our office should you have any questions in addition to what's listed there. Okay, I also just want to verbally highlight setting up your required accounts. This is a common issue that we see for folks sometimes when they're not able to access certain things. We like to start here of have you set up some of these required accounts. So as Mary mentioned, please do note that in order to access any of these accounts, you will need to accept your admission, which you all have done, logging into your application portal and completing your decision reply form. Specifically for you, once you do so, you will be assigned a PID, a personal identification number, and then you will need to set up a password for your PID. So it is important that you set up this password for your PID in order to access resources such as class registration, financial tools, really so much. This information can be found on your application portal. Please do wait at least 72 hours after accepting admission to complete this step. And in some cases, it may take up to a week to generate your PID. So just know that. And then similarly, another very common account that you'll use to access many resources and portals here on campus is your Active Directory. So for steps on activating and accessing your UCSD email account and corresponding Active Directory, if you have any questions, you can go to the IT Services webpage. And I will say that on iNewDegree Student, we do have a section dedicated to this specifically because it can be a common place where students kind of face obstacles, or they might try to skip ahead and they need to do this step first. We worked really closely with Mary in graduate admissions to make sure the process is as clear as possible. So please refer back to those and then contact us if you have any questions. Okay, with that, I will hand it over to my colleagues from Housing, Dining, and Hospitality to talk a little bit about on-campus housing at UC San Diego.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marissa Loa. I want to go ahead and be talking about our apartments and kind of just the community's layouts, kind of just to go ahead and do a deeper look into them. Alrighty, and the next slide, please. Okay, perfect. And then, so these are our 7 communities in grad family housing. 6 of our communities are designated for graduate students, and 1 is designated for faculty and staff, which is the La Jolla del Sol community. So we will not go into that one. Each of our communities offer a range of different sized apartments for many different living styles. At 1 Miramar Street, there are unfurnished 2-bedroom apartments. At Mesa, there are 1 and 3-bedroom apartments, but mostly comprised of like 2 bedrooms. And then for all my cat lovers and cat owners, these 2 communities also allow cats. So it's going to be 1 Miramar Street and Mesa. Our newest communities are Nuevo West, Mesa Nueva, and Nuevo East. Nuevo West offers fully furnished 2, 4, and 6-bedroom apartments with very limited studio spaces. At Mesa Nueva, most of the spaces are furnished studio apartments. We also have 1, 2, and 3-bedroom unfurnished apartments. And at Nuevo East, there are unfurnished 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom apartments. I would say the main distinction between Nuevo West and Nuevo East would be that 1 is furnished and 1 is not. Alrighty, and then next slide, please. Oh, thank you. This map shows basically the footprint encompassing a majority of our apartments. On the left side is one Miramar Street. The bottom is Mesa, so that's split between both South Mesa and Central Mesa. At the top is our newer communities, as you will see here, Nuevo West, Mesa Nueva, and Nuevo East. Throughout graduate and family housing, there are 3 parking lots in the area and surface lot parking in Mesa, but also sprinkled throughout the newer communities as well. There is a multiple campus shuttle stops through the communities, as well as a pedestrian bridge that connects you to the main campus. And then we are also situated very close to 2 trolley stations to connect with the rest of the city. Next slide, please. All righty, so here we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at Nuevo West. This community opened in 2020 and is composed of 2 high-rise buildings. Risa is on the left and Viento is on the right. In Risa, there is a study room on each floor of the building. On the first floor, there is a music room, a community kitchen, and game room space, and a fitness room as well. In Viento, there are lounge spaces on every floor, including a rooftop lounge, great for hosting events, that residents can reserve for free. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so this is going to go ahead and be the living room. This is the mock-up of what a typical living room looks like. So Nuevo West, as a reminder, it is furnished. So in these furnished apartments, we provide a love seat, ottoman, and console table in the living room. Next slide, please. For the kitchen, we provide all major appliances in all apartments, and Nuevo West, we also provide a microwave. I didn't realize how expensive these microwaves are, but just, to save an extra expense when you're moving. Next slide, please. So this is going to go ahead and be at the bedroom. It will include a full-size bed, desk, and chair. And then, oh, thank you. These are the bathrooms. In Nuevo West, there is a sink for every bed space, so everyone gets their own sink space. And then, next slide, thank you. This is the floor plan for one of the 6-bedroom apartments. The 6-bedroom apartments are quite large at 2,100 square feet. It's set up as a townhome with a common area, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bathroom on the first floor. Whereas the 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms are on the second floor. A cool feature for all the shared spaces is that you have the option to request a preferred roommate on your application, but we'll go ahead and get more into that on the next part of the presentation. Alrighty, and then here we're going to go ahead and focus on Nuevo East. This community also opened in 2020 and features 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom unfurnished apartments. In this picture, we have the Exchange building where our main office is located, so the Housing Allocations Office, and where all the magic happens with the applications and everything. There are also reservable community spaces for residents to use to study and for social gatherings. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Portone building, which is the tallest of the 5 apartment buildings in this community at 12 stories. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So this is going to go ahead and just be the overall amenities and resources that we have. So again, as I mentioned, we have the game room, the pool, a lot of barbecue, and outside areas to lounge around. And then we have 3 fitness gyms throughout the community. So all these amenities are accessible to all residents of graduate family housing, no matter what your community is. Okay, great. So on the next slide, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our housing coordinator, Myra, and she'll go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty stuff for the next half of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. So, who's eligible for grad and family housing? So at grad family housing, we provide housing for graduate students enrolled at UC San Diego in a full-time coursework, leading to a graduate level degree. We also accommodate undergrad students with a marital status couple or couples with dependents. Additionally, like Marisa mentioned, we offer housing exclusively for staff and faculty at La Jolla del Sol. Also, postdoctoral scholars are eligible to apply at this community. Next slide, please. We're gonna go over some common questions that we usually get from the students. One of the common question is, what is the wait time? The wait time for housing depends on the selected housing preferences in your housing application, typically ranging from 2 to 6 months. However, in high demand communities like Coast, the wait time can extend from 24 to 28 months. Our website provides statistics to help you explore floor plans that may increase your chances of securing housing on time. Another common question is, why the 2-year term? The 2-year term allows for us to cycle through the waitlist more frequently, giving more grad students the opportunity to live in grad housing. Lastly, on this presentation, you will have our contact information. During the summertime, the best way to contact us will be via email, gradfamilyhousing@ucsd.edu. You can also call us via telephone, or if you are in San Diego, you can visit us. Our office is located in the Exchange Building at Nuevo East. Next slide, please. We're gonna go over the offer process. First, you need to complete your housing application. To apply for grad housing, you must submit a housing application through our portal. Prior to applying, you must obtain your single sign-on, which is your student credentials, to access our portal and join the waitlist. In the application, we request general information. And this is to better understand your housing needs. First, we ask for your marital status. We want to know if you're coming as a single, couple, or family. This is an important detail that helps us allocate housing appropriately. Whether if you're single, then you're going to be eligible for a shared space in the 2, 3, and 4-bedroom apartments. Couples, they are eligible for a 1 and a 2-bedroom apartment as well as studios. For families are eligible to apply for a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom apartment depending on the size of the family. You will also be asked to select up to 3 housing preferences. Those housing preferences don't have to be from the same community. They can be different. Out of the 6 communities that Marisa mentioned, you can select up to 3 housing preferences with your top choice as your highest priority. We try every effort to accommodate your first preference. However, assignments are based on availability. Lastly, we will ask you for your desired move-in date. We encourage applicants to provide the most accurate date possible, as your contract will be issued based on this information. New incoming grad students, they are eligible to move into grad housing as early as June 1st if you need to come to the university for summer housing, for summer sessions. Once your name reaches the top of the waitlist, you will get 2 offers per application. The first offer, you will have the opportunity to either accept or refuse the offer. You will have 48 hours to submit your decision about the offer. If you refuse the offer, your application will return to the waitlist to the same position to wait for a second offer. If you accept the first offer, we will proceed with the next step of the leasing process. If you refuse the offer and it goes back to the waitlist, you will get a second offer. On the second offer, if you accept, we'll go ahead and assign you the rental agreement and all the leasing process. But at that point, if you refuse, your application will be archived and removed from the waitlist. At that point, you will need to reapply again to the waitlist. After you accept the offer, we will issue a rental agreement for 2 years. You will have 24 hours to review and sign. After you sign your rental agreement, if you're a single student, we will provide the roommate information. And the last step of the leasing process will be the online moving orientation.
All right, thank you so much to my colleagues at Housing, Dining, and Hospitality. Again, they'll stick around, so if you do have any questions about on-campus housing, please go ahead and submit those via the Q&A feature, and we'll have some time at the end to talk through those, but they will be monitoring the chat. For now, I am going to talk about some off-campus housing options on behalf of the Basic Needs Hub Off-Campus Housing Office. So we know that many students prefer to live on campus. You are just so much closer. You don't necessarily need to rely on transportation as heavily. But if you do choose to live off campus or you need to look at off-campus options, we have some resources available to you. The first being the off-campus housing website. This is a very helpful website. I would highly recommend it. And it's behind single sign-on. So you use your student email to sign in. And so that way it's a little bit more protected. It's a little bit more relevant to the UC San Diego community. Here you can review property listings for rooms, apartments, houses, shared rentals, etc. You can both search for roommates as well as create your own roommate profile. And you can also access off-campus housing information as well as resources. Another resource that the off-campus housing office provides is housing consultations. Again, you may need your student account set up to take advantage of these, but in general, students can meet with the off-campus housing office to review off-campus housing options, receive general first-time lease signing information, learn more about move-in and move-out resources, as well as connect you with housing-related departments here on campus. They often help with house hunting tips, off-campus rental forms, tenant, landlord, and roommate responsibilities as well. So they really provide a lot of education about what it's like to rent in the US and resources that go along with that. Again, they, in addition to those resources and services, they do a different educational campaign each year. So it's typically a 6-part series that focuses on off-campus housing education. In 2022, they covered the basics. So I think this is a really good place to start because it goes over how to build a housing search plan, what to look for in the housing search process, the application process, as well as signing a lease and moving in. In 2023, they covered their series on housing and identity, and I'd highly recommend the international students in housing. That was very relevant to our population. And then in 2024, they covered how to be a civically engaged renter. So everything from engaging with our student in government or the UC system, local city and county government, as well as state and federal government. Okay, so some additional UC San Diego housing resources. One, AS, or our associated students, so that's our student government, put together a housing guide. So this is an off-campus housing guide compiled by Associated Students, Assistant Vice President of Food and Housing Resources. This is a helpful resource, and it kind of includes a visual breakdown of what the housing search should look like. Additionally, in 2021, so it might be a little bit outdated, but still a lot of the information covered there is as relevant as ever. There was an off-campus housing webinar. So this had presentations from the off-campus housing office, the Office of Ombuds, Student Legal Services, Transportation Services, Associated Students. A lot of different departments came together to host this webinar. And it shared a lot of, again, really helpful resources that takes a very specific look on renting off campus in San Diego. And then finally, I really want to highlight Student Legal Services. So this is a office on campus that's free for students to use, and they will actually review your lease for you if you're looking to rent off campus before you sign it. This is incredible. You usually have to pay a lot of money for this to happen. And so it's a great resource that I really encourage a lot of students to take advantage of because I think as an international student, many times if you are trying to secure housing, you're a little bit more vulnerable because you can't necessarily go in person and look at all the properties. And so as much as you can take advantage of these other resources, such as student legal services, it just aids you in that process altogether. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some unaffiliated, so non-UCSD affiliated. So these are more public search platforms. So many students will use the resources I just talked about. However, there are other common resources students use when they look at off-campus housing options. Two such search engines are padmapper.com to look at local places to rent, as well as spare room. And that's usually more commonly looked for roommates. I will say that there is the UCSD unofficial Facebook housing group. So that is a community resource where students will unofficially find roommates and housing. Again, I stress that this is unofficial. So while it might be a common resource that students use, it is not managed by UC San Diego. And so as always, we really want to make sure that you are being mindful that maybe you're consulting with student legal services to just make sure that everything is above board. Best practices when using Facebook group to find housing. So never make a payment without viewing the inside of the property. I know that for international students, you are in different situations, but we want as much as possible to protect you from any scams or being victims of any scams. With that, avoid trusting Facebook accounts that might be newer or may have a history of spamming. Always visit the profile of the person posting and make sure that it all looks good. It makes sense. There's nothing suspicious or kind of gives you maybe a bad feeling. When looking at housing, try to find those posted by existing UCSD students or alum. Try to find roommate situations with other students. If they're able to go in person, even better. And then you can also, this is a resource to look for any shorter term housing available. So a common question that students have with housing searching tips is when to begin. So generally for summer leases, so any summer leases starting in June, the time to start is typically April through May is like a very common time that students might search for housing. For fall, so for programs starting in August or September, June through July. Now, please note that if you are looking at a place in advance, and let's say you find something over the summer, but you're not able to move in until September, the landlord might request a holding fee to hold the property for you, or you might offer to pay this. Again, this is something that I would run by student legal services because while this is a common practice, it's also, we don't want you to get scammed out of this money if it's not a viable option. So while it's one of those things where it's a common practice, but we want to make sure that you're meeting with people and making sure that your specific situation is going to work. It's also really important that when you are in the housing search, that you're really identifying what is a need versus what's a want. So specifically for your budget, how much are you able to spend on housing? And in terms of that, what are leases available and maybe of more interest to you? So a month to month versus a 6-month lease versus a year lease. Additionally, looking at location and with location, different public transit options, as I know many international students rely on public transit to get to campus and back. Are you interested in having roommates sharing the cost? If so, how many? Amenities, how important are these to you? So like laundry on site, parking, utilities, etc. And when possible, always request a virtual and/or in-person tour of the listings. Try not to sign any lease or pay any deposits before seeing the property, and ensure that the property aligns with your needs and wants. I'll also add here that the off-campus housing office hosts the off-campus housing fair. Obviously, this is more geared towards our students who are already here, who maybe are living on campus and now looking to move off campus. But we included this flyer because it is something that the off-campus housing office hosts every year. So again, they are a really great resource, and we'll put their contact information in the chat in order to contact them and get more resources and information from them. Okay, so we talked a little about on-campus housing, we talked a little about off-campus housing. Now we're going to cover some other miscellaneous housing resources. So I do want to highlight that our office actually has a dedicated housing section on our website. And this is because we know that looking for housing as an international student can come with its own host of challenges. So we really cover things kind of through the specific lens of an international student. So whether that be how to look for certain scams, which I'll actually get into more in a moment, as well as different resources specifically relevant to you. So one such example is we work with different third-party companies to find off-campus housing, such as like Hugs or Room Chaser. These are organizations that don't actually require a credit score to apply for a lease. And many international students don't have a credit score because they don't have a social security number yet, right? And so a lot of these companies were actually started by international students who've stayed in the US. And so a lot of these resources are highlighted on our website, and we'd recommend taking a look at those. Also knowing that many students might take advantage of transitional housing. So let's say you wanted to come to the US a little bit early, and maybe it's before your official move-in date. And so you need to find a place to stay for maybe a week, maybe more, before you are actually able to move into your long-term housing. So there are public platforms such as Hostel World, Airbnb, VRBO. Another idea is corporate housing. So that is typically geared towards working professionals. And these apartments are furnished and usually short term. One program that I actually want to highlight is our Solana Beach Host Family Program. So this is a really special program. It's hosted with some of our community partners, and they actually host a homestay program where you can stay with an American family, usually between 3 and 5 days, and kind of get this really amazing cultural experience as well as staying with them for free. So this is really a cross-cultural exchange. It's someone who they might help you adjust to the shock of a new country. You get a chance to meet everyday Americans and stay in their home, help you feel established and prepared for UC San Diego. And sometimes have seen really beautiful friendships come between their host family and them. So I would highly recommend that you check it out. Please know that this is a short-term option. So again, it's usually only for 3 to 5 days, but it is a really special experience for those who participate. Okay, so commuter resources. So what we mean by commuter is someone who commutes from off campus to campus for work or school. So we do have some dedicated commuter resources at UC San Diego where like you can have a study lounge or a place to heat up your food using a microwave, things like that. So Shauna, thank you for putting some of these resources in the chat, but there are resources dedicated specifically if you do find yourself commuting and maybe you can't go back and forth all the time, but you can like stay on campus and be like, okay, here's where I'm going to heat up my lunch, here's where I'm going to study, etc., before going back after my next class or what have you. All right, so I do want to spend a little bit of time on scams because unfortunately, international students can be a common target for a lot of scammers because students might be looking for housing from their home country. They're not always able to go in person to view it. So as much as possible, we want to make sure that you are protected and you know what the red flags to look for. So in general, be aware of housing scams. They might be more common on websites such as Craigslist and things like that, but signs of scams targeting renters that you can look for is the advertised price of a rental property is much, much lower than that of similar properties. Another one is the person trying to rent to you claims to be an agent for the property owner, but they're too busy, they're out of the country, and they're otherwise unavailable to respond to you or handle the rental. The owner or agent requires and pressures you to sign the lease before you see the rental property. The owner or agent can't let you view the property or enter the home or apartment or charges you a fee to view it. Another one is you might be asked to wire money as a deposit or payment of the first and month's rent. Remember that wiring money is the same as giving cash. So in these instances, if it is a scam, you cannot get a refund, even if you found out that the offer was a fraud. Another red flag is the owner or agent uses high pressure sales tactics, such as urging you to rent quickly before someone else gets the property. So if they find that they are pressuring you or making it really time sensitive, making it really like scary, that is a common sign of a scam. And another one is the person preparing the lease writes a higher monthly rate or additional fees that you hadn't agreed upon or discussed previously. Another one might be that the landlord directs you to a website to get a free credit check. Sometimes this can be a tactic for harvesting your identity. Only disclose information on an application after you've seen the property. So I know that this can sound scary, but we highlight this information so that, again, you can be as safe as possible and make as smart decisions as you can when looking at off-campus housing. Again, I'd highly recommend meeting with Student Legal Services to review any leases or rental properties if you do have questions. But there are other things that you can do to protect yourself when looking for off-campus housing. So if you're not able to see the unit in person, if you do have any contacts in San Diego, such as a family or friend who's willing to go check it out, this is highly recommended. Some even hire a local real estate agent if that's an option available to you. Another thing you can do is check the home address online using Google Maps or another map feature to see and just verify that it matches what's being advertised online. As always, we recommend using UC San Diego's off-campus housing website when possible. So again, this is behind single sign-on, which means it's a little bit more protected for our UC San Diego community. You still want to be smart and watch out for any red flags, but generally this is a little bit of a safer resource for folks. Consult with Student Legal Services if you have any questions or concerns about a property you are looking at. And please do report any scams that you're aware of, even if you don't fall victim to the scam. Obviously, if you do, but for us, please report it to the UC San Diego Police Department as well as our office, because we try as best as possible to do a lot of scam prevention and awareness. And so when we hear about different types of scams that folks are trying, we kind of add it to our list to make sure that our community isn't negatively impacted by these. So you can find a lot of this information on isafety.ucsd.edu under housing scams, and then again, consulting with Student Legal Services at sls.ucsd.edu. Okay, so changing gears a little bit, we'll end with some ways that you can get engaged with our community, and then we'll have dedicated question and answer time at the end. So our welcome guide is created for our new incoming students with helpful checklists that are broken down by kind of chronology of like chronological order of what to do when. So a checklist for before you start classes, a checklist for preparing for arrival, and a checklist for upon arrival. So you can go ahead and check out our guide at iPrograms. Wonderful, thank you. Our program guides. Additionally, we have our surf check guide, and our surf check guide is a little bit different to the welcome guide because it was actually created for students by students. So this guide was created based on the most common questions students have when they were transitioning to life in the US and life at UC San Diego. So it covers topics like housing, arranging transportation from the airport to campus, setting up a phone account, setting up a bank account, and more. So I'd highly recommend checking out our surf check guide as well. Finally, our Grad Pals program. So this is a peer mentorship program that matches incoming graduate students with current graduate students, most commonly based on their same department. But it allows new students to settle in by giving them an opportunity to ask both academic and non-academic related questions, provide them support specifically in your first few weeks, and ease their transition into graduate life at UC San Diego. So you can scan the QR code on the screen if you're interested in applying for the Grad Pals Peer Mentorship Program, and we'll go ahead and put a link in the chat as well. Our programs are our signature programs. So if you're interested, you can head to iprograms.ucsd.edu. But basically, we have lots of different programs that occur on a monthly basis. So at any given point in the month, there's different ways to interact with our community. So this week, we're having a global coffee hour. I think next week we have a crafting event. The week after, we have a game night, so on and so forth. So it's a great way to kind of be a part of the international community here at UC San Diego. And iEvents calendar is our live calendar populated with all these different events that are happening. So it might be the case where it's hosted by our office. This calendar also reflects events hosted by other offices or student organizations on campus that either have a global focus or are targeting international student scholars and families. I know many students will bookmark iEvents to just see like what's happening on campus. But if you are curious about kind of what life on campus looks like, what student life at UC San Diego looks like, I highly recommend that you follow us on Instagram. So our handle is @istudents.ucsd, and this gives a great snapshot into what your life as a student might look like. And I know that our marketing communications team is always trying to focus on content that's interesting to our viewers, and I think we're going to do an Instagram giveaway soon for our new incoming students. So make sure you follow, and then you can learn more information about the Instagram giveaway. Okay, so some final reminders. So here are a couple of things that you can start doing actually right now. So you can begin requesting your visa documents through iServices. Again, that was covered in more detail at last week's webinar. You can also apply for on-campus housing, mentioned by our good colleagues from HDH. Do note that around mid-May, HDH starts to send out housing contracts, but offers are made 60 days prior to the requested move-in date. So that might fluctuate depending on what you want your move-in date to be. And I'll allow my HDH colleagues to speak more to that should there be future questions. In July is typically deadlines for some health immunization requirements and trainings. And then September is an exciting time where we have move-in and check-in and international orientation. So if you want a sneak peek of that, iorientation.ucsd.edu is a great place to look for that. Okay, so a sneak peek of some upcoming pre-arrival webinars. So later this week on March 13th at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, we will have student health, insurance, and immunization requirements. Then next week, we'll talk about graduate student funding and English language requirements for instructional assistants. Then we'll talk about student life and getting involved on campus, as well as finances and student accounts, transferring your CVIS record, and campus safety. So as a reminder, all of these you can register for at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. It'll be the fall 2025 pre-arrival webinar. And that's also where you can view previous webinar recordings if they are available. Okay, one last slide before we enter into our open question and answer. So we do have a survey. So if you fill out this survey, one, you may get entered into a gift card raffle for filling out the survey. And two, it's also really helpful for us to understand what is helpful about these pre-arrival webinars, if there are certain topics that you wish maybe we would have covered in more detail. So let's say like at the housing webinar, it would be really helpful if you can cover this in a little bit more detail or speak about that. We always are trying to make these as helpful as possible for our students. So please take a moment, scan the QR code, and fill out a survey. And you can also put in any questions you might have of like covering this, and we can try to add that as well as we're able. Okay, so with that, we will transition to some time for open question and answer. And I see that many of our questions have already been answered through the Q&A feature. So Thank you. Thank you. Let me hand it over to my fellow presenters. Are there any reminders or things that you think would be beneficial to verbally highlight for the group?
Hi, Grace. Yes, definitely. Like you mentioned, we make offers 60 days out, so be constantly checking on your email, the email that you provide in your housing application as the primary email, because those offers will be sent to that email. If you request a move-in day in August, so you will hear from our office in June. So it's usually 60 days. We wanted to provide with a lot of time in advance to the students so they have time to arrange everything.
Thank you, Myra. All right, so there doesn't seem to be any more questions for today. So thank you again to our campus partners. Oh, we have one. So this is actually great. We have one last question. So if you do have a burning question, make sure to try to submit it now. Um, okay, so we have one question here that says, I tried to apply for on-campus housing, but I got an email saying that the application has been canceled because I'm not currently enrolled. What would you suggest to students maybe in this scenario?
Yes, typically, if your application was canceled, it's because you requested a move-in date earlier than June. Make sure you request a move-in date after June. So when we're reviewing applications right now, because right now we do check the eligibility, and if you're not enrolled, of course, your application will be canceled. But if your application was canceled, please send us an email and we can reinstate it.
Wonderful. And Myra or Marisa, if you were able to put the email in the chat, just as a friendly reminder of how folks can best contact you, that would be lovely. Okay, so our next question is how many days does it take to get your I-20? Good question. I'm sure many students have this question. So as a reminder, it takes approximately 15 business days to get your I-20 from our office. Now, that being said, it is also dependent that the application is complete and accurate. So I would highly recommend watching our webinars from last week that goes into pretty good detail about what an accurate, complete application looks like, including funding requirements and all that good information. But once the application is fully complete with accurate information, approximately 15 business days. All right, we have another question asking about price details for Nueva West, or maybe more generally, is there a website or place students can go to understand the price details for the various graduate and family housing options?
Yes, so all like the rental information, like the rates, the layouts, the floor plans, and for the newer communities, there's gonna be like even virtual videos that they can also view. It's all gonna be at the Graduate and Family Housing website. I can attach the link in the chat as well.
Wonderful. Okay, so that should be in the chat shortly. Our next question is there a way to get reminded via email for all the webinars being held? Yes, there is. So we have something called our iNew Student Newsletter. So once you accept your application or your offer of admission to UC San Diego, we automatically add your UCSD email to our iNew Student Newsletter list. So as a reminder, your UCSD email will become the primary way UC San Diego communicates with you. So it is good practice to already get used to checking your UCSD email. And that is where we're also sending all of our iNew student newsletters, which both contain information regarding upcoming pre-arrival webinars. If there's any trends or updates regarding immigration policy or travel, things of that nature, we'll include it in iNew student newsletter as well. If for some reason you are not receiving the iNew student newsletter, or you would like to request your personal email to be added to the iNew student newsletter distribution list, you can go ahead and email iprograms.ucsd.edu, and we can go ahead and look into that for you. But again, your UCSD email should already be receiving our iNew student newsletter. So please go in and log into your UCSD email, verify that you're receiving those. And if not, please do contact iprograms@ucsd.edu. And I went ahead and I put that in the chat as well. Okay, it looks like our last question is just a thank you to all of our presenters for such an informative session. It's so helpful for our new and incoming students as they transition and prepare for this next chapter of their lives at UC San Diego. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. With that, take care and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.